The snow fell softly across the quiet streets of the city, blanketing everything in white as Christmas lights flickered warmly in shop windows. Richard Hayes, a successful entrepreneur known for his sharp business instincts, walked briskly with his 7-year-old daughter, Lily, after finishing a late holiday dinner. Though he had more wealth than he could ever spend, his world often felt hollow, weighed down by loneliness since the passing of his wife 3 years ago. Lily was his anchor, his light, the only reminder that life still had beauty in its simplest forms. As they approached the bus stop near their home, Lily suddenly tugged at his sleeve, her small mitten pointing toward a bench. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice filled with innocent concern, "why is she sleeping here?" Richard followed her gaze and saw a young woman curled up tightly, a thin blanket barely covering her as snowflakes gathered in her hair. She couldn't have been older than 20, and beside her sat a small cardboard box with only a few belongings. The contrast was jarring, holiday cheer all around, yet this fragile figure seemed invisible to the world. Lily's eyes glistened with confusion and compassion, and in that moment, Richard's heart clenched. He had built a life around numbers, profits, and success, but his daughter's question pierced deeper than any business challenge ever could. "Daddy," Lily repeated softly, "she looks so cold. Can we help her?" Richard hesitated, torn between practicality and humanity, yet he felt the weight of Lily's gaze, innocent, pure, and unwavering. Something inside him stirred, as if reminding him of the man he once was before money dulled his spirit. Richard crouched down, brushing the snow from his shoes as he studied the young woman more closely. Her cheeks were pale from the cold, her breathing shallow but steady. A paper cup with just a few coins sat beside her box, almost buried beneath the snow. He felt a pang of guilt. How many times had he passed people like her without stopping, dismissing them as someone else's problem? Yet here was his daughter, staring with wide eyes, waiting for him to do something. Lily slipped her tiny hand into his and whispered, "Mommy always said we should be kind, even when it's hard." Her words cut deep, for they echoed the very advice his late wife used to give him whenever he became too consumed with work. Richard swallowed hard, realizing that this was no coincidence, this was a moment demanding a choice. He took off his scarf and gently wrapped it around the woman's shoulders. She stirred, her eyelids fluttering open, revealing eyes filled with both fear and exhaustion. "It's okay," Richard said softly, his voice more tender than he expected. "You're safe. We just want to help." The woman blinked in confusion, as if uncertain whether to trust his kindness. Lily knelt down beside her, offering a shy smile. "Hi, I'm Lily," she said brightly. "Do you want to come home with us? It's warm there." The innocence of the invitation disarmed the silence, and for the first time that evening, Richard felt something shift within him. He wasn't just a wealthy man standing in the cold, he was a father being reminded by his child of what true wealth really meant. The woman hesitated, glancing between Richard and Lily as if the offer were too good to believe. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "I don't want to be a burden." Richard shook his head firmly, though his tone was gentle. "No one is a burden when they're in need," he said. "My car is just around the corner. Please, let us take you somewhere safe." With slow, unsteady movements, she allowed him to help her up, clutching her small box as if it were the only thing tethering her to this world. They walked together through the falling snow, Lily skipping beside her new companion, chattering softly to ease the silence. When they reached the car, Richard opened the door, and the warmth from the heater spilled out like a promise of comfort. The woman sat quietly, eyes darting around, still cautious but visibly relieved to be shielded from the bitter cold. Lily leaned over and wrapped the scarf tighter around her, smiling with the same boundless compassion her mother once carried. As Richard drove, he couldn't shake the gnawing thought, how had society failed her so completely? And worse, how many others were out there right now, unseen and unheard? His wealth suddenly felt meaningless compared to the simple act of keeping someone safe for one night. He glanced at the rearview mirror and saw Lily resting her head on the woman's shoulder as though they were already family. For the first time in years, Richard felt his hardened heart soften, as if Christmas itself had reached into the coldest part of his soul to remind him of the true gift of giving. When they arrived at Richard's home, a grand house adorned with glowing wreaths and garlands, the young woman's eyes widened, not with envy, but with disbelief that she was being welcomed inside. Lily tugged her hand gently, leading her past the glittering Christmas tree and into the cozy warmth of the living room. The fireplace crackled, filling the air with the scent of pine and cinnamon. Richard retrieved a blanket and handed it to her, noticing how thin and fragile she seemed under her layers of worn clothing. "You can rest here tonight," he said, his voice firm yet kind. She clutched the blanket close, tears welling in her eyes, whispering, "Thank you, you don't know what this means." Richard gave her a nod, though inside his chest a storm of emotions swirled. Shame for his years of indifference, but also a rising sense of purpose he hadn't felt in ages. Lily, ever the little hostess, rushed to the kitchen to bring out cookies and milk, setting them carefully on the table. "It's Christmas Eve," she said proudly, "and no one should be alone on Christmas." The woman's tears finally spilled over, and she covered her face, overcome by the kindness of strangers. Richard sat quietly, reflecting on how his daughter's simple compassion had broken open a door he'd kept locked for so long. Here, in this moment, it wasn't wealth, success, or power that mattered, it was humanity, shared between one child, one father, and a stranger who had been invisible until love made her seen. As the hours passed, the woman, who introduced herself as Emily, began to share her story in fragments. She had grown up in foster care, drifting from home to home, never finding a place where she truly belonged. After aging out of the system, she struggled to keep steady work, and when medical bills from an injury piled up, she lost her apartment. Richard listened in silence, his heart heavy with each detail. He realized how easily life's storms could swallow someone whole when they lacked the safety nets he had always taken for granted. Lily, nestled on the couch with her favorite blanket, interrupted softly, "Emily, you can stay with us, right, Daddy?" Her innocent suggestion hung in the air like a dare. Richard looked at Emily, saw the mixture of hope and fear in her eyes, and something inside him broke open. He thought of his late wife, who had always believed in second chances, in opening doors instead of closing them. "Yes," Richard said finally, his voice steady. "You can stay here, at least until you get back on your feet. We'll figure things out together." Emily's lips parted in shock, her eyes glistening as she whispered, I don't know how to thank you." Richard smiled faintly. "Just accept the kindness, that's thanks enough." In that moment, he understood something profound. His wealth was not measured by the money in his accounts, but by the lives he touched. And tonight, guided by his daughter's unshakable compassion, he had chosen to invest in humanity itself. Christmas morning arrived with golden light streaming through the frosted windows, casting a warm glow over the living room. Lily squealed with delight as she discovered presents under the tree, but instead of tearing into them, she carefully handed one to Emily, a scarf she had secretly chosen with her father weeks before. Emily pressed it to her chest, overcome by the gesture, realizing it wasn't just a gift of fabric but a symbol of belonging. Richard watched them with quiet awe, the weight of loneliness that had shadowed his life since his wife's passing beginning to lift. For the first time in years, his house felt like a home again, alive with laughter and connection. Later that afternoon, Richard found himself making calls, not to brokers or board members, but to local shelters and charities. He pledged not only financial support but also his time, determined to help others who, like Emily, had been forgotten. That evening, as snow fell gently outside, the three of them sat by the fire, Lily nestled between them, her small voice whispering, "See, Daddy. We made Christmas magic." Richard placed an arm around both of them, his heart fuller than it had ever been. He realized that his daughter had not only saved Emily but had saved him too, teaching him that true wealth lies not in what we keep, but in what we give. And so, on that quiet Christmas night, a grieving father, a hopeful child, and a once-lost young woman discovered the timeless truth: kindness has the power to turn strangers into family and despair into hope, one simple act of love at a time.